Welcome to a place where you will get to know about the historic past.
The Kurukshetra War involved nearly every major kingdom of its age. Standing at the center of this collision was a 16-year-old whose tactical mastery rivaled the most experienced generals on the field. His name was Abhimanyu. He represented the union of the most powerful lineages in the epic. As the son of Arjuna, he carried the legacy of the Pandavas. As the nephew of Krishna, he was tied to the Yadava clan. On the 13th day, the Kaurava commander Drona deployed the Chakravyuh. This diagram shows the formation's design, a multi-layered, rotating labyrinth of soldiers intended to trap and crush any invading force. The rings were engineered to pulse open just long enough to draw a target in before snapping shut and rotating in opposing directions to isolate them. Only Arjuna knew the secret to breaking this machine, and he had been lured miles away to a different front. With their primary strategist absent, the Pandava army faced a total tactical collapse. The rotating wall of the Chakravyuh loomed as an invincible barrier that would likely end the war that afternoon. The only chance for a counterattack rested on a memory from Abhimanyu'S time in the womb. The Mahabharata describes Arjuna explaining the mechanics of battle formations to his wife, Subhadra. The unborn Abhimanyu heard the detailed explanation for penetrating the Chakravyuh's outer layers. However, the lesson ended before Arjuna could describe how to escape the formation once the center was reached. Knowing the risks, the prince volunteered to lead the charge. He would puncture the first layer, with the other Pandava kings pledged to follow immediately behind him to keep the breach from closing. The entry was a success. Using the knowledge he had carried since before birth, Abhimanyu navigated the initial defensive rotations and punched through the heavy perimeter. This left the young prince in a precarious position. He possessed the highly restricted information required to enter the trap, but he was now deep inside a maze he had never learned to exit. As Abhimanyu disappeared into the inner rings, the Pandava kings rushed the gap, intending to secure the corridor and support their vanguard. They were stopped by a single warrior. Jayaratha, empowered by a divine boon, held the perimeter against the entire Pandava force. This stone relief captures the chaotic density of the defense that kept Abhimanyu'S family on the outside. With the backup force neutralized, the mechanical layers of the Chakravyuh completed their rotation. The gap Abhimanyu had created vanished as the walls of soldiers locked back into their circular configuration. The isolation was complete. The 16-year-old was now the only Pandava inside the formation, surrounded by a closed army of legendary veterans and kings who had waited for this exact moment. Abhimanyu'S response was a display of elite discipline. He successfully engaged multiple legendary kings simultaneously, proving he could match the skill and strength of the most famous warriors in the Kaurava ranks. Realizing single combat would not stop him, the Kaurava commanders discarded the traditional rules of engagement. They coordinated a simultaneous swarm, attacking the lone boy from every direction at once.
The subtraction of his resources began with his range. His bow was snapped by a flurry of arrows, forcing him to discard his primary advantage and draw his sword. The combat became claustrophobic. As the enemy pressed inward, the sheer mass of the crowd shattered his sword and shield, leaving him with no specialized weapons. Finally, his mobility was destroyed. His chariot was smashed and his horses killed, grounding him and stripping away the height and speed he needed to navigate the enclosure. With his bow and his sword and his chariot gone, the battle shifted from a tactical contest to a test of endurance. His survival now relied entirely on his ability to keep standing while his physical advantages were erased one by one. Standing in the wreckage of his own chariot, he seized a broken wheel. This heavy, ornate piece of wood and iron became his last instrument of defense against the circling army. The image of the exhausted prince heaving the massive wheel above his head is how the epic immortalizes his final moments. It was a raw act of resistance in a space where all conventional hope had been removed. When the wheel failed, he fought on with a mace. Even in a state of total physical collapse, he continued to deflect the veterans surrounding him. The fatal blow came during this final mace fight.
Surrounded and overwhelmed, Abhimanyu was struck down in a collective attack that the epic itself identifies as a cowardly breach of the warrior's code. The systematic removal of his weapons, armor, and mobility served only to expose the raw intensity of his commitment to his duty. The enemy killed the prince, but they found no way to break his resolve. The killing of Abhimanyu fundamentally altered the nature of the war. With the death of a child in such an uneven and dishonorable manner, the remaining ethical boundaries of the battlefield dissolved. When Arjuna learned how his son had been isolated and swarmed, his grief immediately transformed into a focused, lethal intent. He swore a terrifying vow. Jayadratha, the man who had blocked the Pandavas from reaching Abhimanyu, would be dead by the next sunset. If Arjuna failed to kill him by then, he would walk into a funeral pyre and end his own life. Abhimanyu's fall removed the final moral guardrails of the conflict, pushing both sides into a total war from which there was no return for either army. Although Abhimanyu died that day, his lineage survived. His unborn son, Parikshit, was protected throughout the war and eventually became the king who would ensure the Pandava dynasty endured for generations. Across centuries, Abhimanyu has endured as a primary reference for youthful valor. Monuments and oral traditions preserve the specific details of his final stand, keeping his story alive in cultural memory long after the kingdoms of the epic faded. He is a rare figure in mythology, a hero defined not by a final victory, but by how he conducted himself in a certain and unavoidable defeat. Abhimanyu's story suggests that a warrior's purpose remains valid even when success is impossible. He proves that the merit of a person is found in the refusal to abandon duty after every advantage has vanished.